Hey guys, vlog number 29, and it is 7:23 p.m. November 26th, Pacific Standard Time. Probably should have said the Pacific Standard Time after the actual time as opposed to whatever. Vlog number 29. In this vlog, I wanted to talk about, since I covered my least favorite genre and category, my favorite, sci-fi. I love sci-fi. I'm a big sci-fi fan. Maybe not as big of a fan as others. I mean, obviously, I don't know every single category, every single uh, different kind of sci-fi. So maybe that doesn't necessarily qualify me as sci-fi fan in the strictest sense. I mean, I love Star Trek and Star Wars, which some people would argue was more fantasy than science fiction, but I digress. The thing I love about sci-fi, I think, mostly has to do with Star Trek, and this is probably why Star Trek is my favorite series, even though the original series I kind of didn't like so much. It was at a time that I grew up in the 70s, but I mean, very, very late 70s. I mean, the end of the 70s. And so a lot of what was in reruns, a lot of stuff that made its way in syndication and all that kind of stuff and traveled to my neck of the woods in Minneapolis, Minnesota, was Star Trek. Shows like The Twilight Zone. I used to watch these shows on our UHF, and this time it was KITN, which later became Fox affiliate. And then, of course, TV 23, and of course, KXLI, St. Cloud. And if you're listening and you've made your way across this channel, I'm from Minnesota, Minneapolis, and born and raised, loved it. But yeah, like I said, that's where sci-fi tickled me. And I had a English teacher that one of the things I think teachers did occasionally, I don't know if they do this anymore, sometimes I think they just, when they want to take a bit of a break from some of the courses, they'll pop in a tape and have everyone watch a show or a film. And the one that I specifically enjoyed was The Twilight Zone. Although I didn't watch it on a regular basis, I mean, it was a little too spooky for me. It kind of weirded me out when I was younger and stuff. But it had a lot of the same elements that I loved about Star Trek, which is that it wasn't about the stupid, silly ship on a string, right? I mean, it wasn't about the horrible effects and things like that by today's standard, which, some people would consider laughable. And I talked about what sometimes makes horrible, terrible movies great and all that kind of stuff. And I don't think it has as much to do with some of the particulars as much as it has to do with a whole lot of other things. And I would say that Star Trek, when it first started out, if it wasn't around for nearly 75 years, I think-ish, somewhere thereabout, right? Most people probably wouldn't regard it to, or with any more regard than they do some of the stuff that I talked about, like Mystery Science Theater 3000, kind of riff on and make jokes about. Meaning that despite when it was made, it still wasn't great television. I mean, it was still kind of hokey and funky and all that kind of stuff. I don't think it was as bad as anything that, everything that's on Mystery Science Theater 3000 or what people make jokes about. But the ham or over-the-top acting by Shatner to some of the really sometimes strange and weird concepts or whatever. But I was very much sucked in to that. I liked it because I thought it dealt with ideas and premises that were interesting, like The Twilight Zone without the sci-fi. But when it comes to sci-fi, I think it's about storytelling, no matter what the genre. It was, whether it's Western or it's in drama or it's whatever. It's about the story and what the story is and what is being told and why that story is being told, and maybe what are some things to think about? And that's what Star Trek was for me. The very beginning, I'm talking about even before The Next Generation, which, like I said, it was still laughable. It was very similar to The Twilight Zone in many regards in terms of my own interest. But yeah, that to me is pretty much when I think about sci-fi, and even through the years as it's kind of changed, I think there's lots of other things that can kind of go along with it that can make it titillating or that can draw viewers in. And I think there's lots of things that have been done to do that very thing. And I don't think that's a new thing either. I think obviously you have to have bait or candy or something that kind of draws you in and maybe helps it go down in terms of, a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. And I don't think it was chock full of agenda either. I think it was just to tell this story, there has to be something in there for you. It's like food for the mind, right? You got to have some vegetables, you got to have the meat, and then you got to have some dessert for later on. And that was kind of the whole thing about the plot, right? Is that's where and how it kind of developed. And so, like I said, when it comes to sci-fi, to me, what makes great sci-fi is really just about the meat and potatoes, man. It's the story, and whether or not people want to come along for the ride and that story, and however many different ways that you get them enticed to do that. Today, I think an entire season could last all of like 10 episodes or sometimes less depending on the streaming service. But I think the primary thing that is most important, as it is with anything, especially when people look back and say, how much has changed and what has changed and, what is this or that or whatever, it's the story. I think if you tell a good story, even if it's not done in a great way, even if there are some things missing, even if there's some details like the ship on a string, you can kind of overlook it if you're able to get into the meat, the thing that was supposed to bring you there to begin with. And so, yeah, some sci-fi, whether some people would kind of deem it good or bad, I think ultimately is going to come down to the story. Now, the execution and how that story is told can wade in very tremendously and have an impact on how well something is either accepted or it's not. But I definitely do believe and definitely do feel that when it comes to sci-fi, it's got to be great storytelling. And I think I don't think with all the special effects and the modern age technology, I don't think that you can phone it in. I think it can help make really terrible stories, just like sci-fi, palatable enough where people will go into seats and have a clickbaity experience where they feel like, this is not good. This isn't really what I came here for. But for the most part, yeah, I think when it comes to sci-fi, and sometimes not just sci-fi, but what people think or say or critique is kind of lacking, I think that's it. Because the truth of the matter is, I think despite the criticisms that some things may get, I think you silence them by putting together something that's truly, I want to say exceptional, but truly done in a way that even if you don't necessarily like it, right? At least you don't necessarily like the story that's being told. Like I said, I'm not a fan of The Godfather. I'm completely aware that cinematically, technically, in every way that people can kind of think of, it's truly probably one of the best films ever made. I don't disagree with that. I just don't like the story. And so it's not a good film to me. But I wouldn't tear it down, as Quentin Tarantino has said in terms of, some of the best films that he liked, which is whether you liked them or not, you couldn't bring them down. And I think when it comes to sci-fi, telling a story, doing a good series, I think that's true. I think Firefly is a pretty good example of that. I think a lot of the networks didn't, or at least Fox didn't really want to give it much of a chance, neither did the other ones. It became a cult ish type of attraction, but I don't think it was enough to sustain it or enough to where they thought, gee, we could do anything other than a movie, which is what brought about the film Serenity, which was based on the series Firefly. It was a great show, great series, but it never got its legs, or at least if it did, like Enterprise is another one. It got its legs, but the entire time that it was off and running, it almost seemed as if somewhere something was trying to chop them off as they were trying to get running. And I'll be honest, I was one of the people that didn't like Enterprise. I'm a hater. I hated it, and I didn't give it a chance. And I'm definitely as responsible for probably not watching it or accepting it as anyone else. And the fact that now that I look back at it and I actually want to watch it with my mom, I can honestly say I think I was wrong. I should have given it a better chance. But because I was stuck in my feelings about it and the fact that I wanted something more along the lines of The Next Generation or Deep Space Nine or something like that, I really just didn't give it a chance. And I thought, well, I understood that it was a prequel kind of series as far as the chronological order, but I really honestly didn't like it when Lucas did it with, the Anakin saga. And I really didn't feel like the Next Generation, not Next Generation, but I really didn't feel like Star Trek needed to do that. Now, can I admit that I was wrong in terms of that? Well, sure. I mean, and when I say wrong, I don't have any problems admitting I was wrong. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But the thing is that, it wasn't something that I enjoyed. I also didn't like the reboot of the original series. J.J. Abrams, I can take or leave the things that he does. I don't hate him or love him, but I absolutely did hate those reboots. And the alternative timeline thing, which I thought was a bit lazy, although story-wise, I think it rose or failed based on whether it could tell a story, it could be compelling, and I think people could care about what story was being told ultimately. And so, springboarding from that, I think there's a lot of things that, people I think are very, very tough nowadays in terms of their criticisms. I'm not necessarily sure that it's always fair. I know that I'm not always fair, like I said. I have my own biases, and I'm certainly saying this because I don't want it to seem as though I'm giving what is my opinion about what makes good and great sci-fi is that it's the end-all be-all. I don't know that I would say that I'm any authority in any capacity when it comes to Star Trek or anything. I just know that I have a passion for it. I love it. I know what I like, and I know what I absolutely don't. But being around as long as I have been, I can definitely tell you I've been wrong a lot more times than I've been right when it comes to some things. When it comes to sometimes TV shows, I'll be honest, some of my favorite TV shows of all time, they were not shows that when they originally were picked up or they were on that I immediately was drawn to. I can say that full-fledged. So as much as I like Star Trek The Next Generation, if it had been up to me and if I hadn't watched it, and me not watching it, it wouldn't be here to this day because I didn't care about it the first year. I thought Bald Captain, I didn't like Kirk all that much, but the guy kind of reminded me of Captain Stubing, the captain of the Love Boat. I thought, and when I did watch it, I mean, some of the costumes and the skirts, and I mean, it's just some of it was just. I mean, it was really bad, and at least to me, in terms of the scripts and the way that they did things, and yeah, and if it had been up to me for it to stick around, I don't think Star Trek would be enjoying 75 years the way it is now. So the reason I mention that is because, times change, people change, things can develop, and we all have a blind spot, I think, and I think we have preferences and biases. I just think that it's important to maybe not necessarily be married to biases, because I'll say, while I don't have any regrets about the things that I, didn't watch, like Enterprise, I then look, past it, and I recognize, things might have been a little bit more fun if maybe I would have given it a better chance. Maybe I would have explored it a little bit. One of the series that I didn't watch at all was the reboot of Battlestar Galactica, and that was not for the fact that I hated it or I didn't like it or anything like that. I just, by the time that it was running, I didn't know if it would last. It did last for a little bit, so therefore, by the time I was going to pick it up, I mean, an entire season, I think, was like 23 episodes, and they were like 3 or 4 seasons in by the time I was like, I want to catch up. And by the time that happened, I wasn't entirely sure that I could, even though Sci-Fi ran an entire marathon on it. And I just, for whatever reason, even when I watched it, I still felt kind of a little bit lost and like, okay, what's this about and where does this come from and all that kind of stuff. And it's just, yeah. So, yeah. So when it comes in terms of sci-fi, I don't think, I don't think there's any hard rules per se when it comes to, like, it has to have ships and it has to be, it has to be centered here or there or whatever. I don't know. Some people, I mean, I'm sure there's a textbook, definition, but for me, when it comes to sci-fi, I think it has to be about storytelling that specifically has science and science fiction, and as it relates to not only technology, but man and human beings' relationship there to it. That to me, I think, would be the definition of what sci-fi is. But short of that, I don't think you need to have ships. I don't think you need to have space battles. I don't think it has to run a certain course, and it has to have, certain ideas that are kind of regurgitated a little bit. I mean, I know some things are kind of par for the course a little bit, but I think some things kind of get, they kind of get ran to the ground a little bit too much. So, but there are some great series that I've yet to see Wynonna Earp, I think it is. I want to kind of check that. The Expanse. I know, I'm sure some people will probably slap me for not having seen that. And there's some people who are saying great things about it, but I never got a chance to. I think once sci-fi kind of fell off for me, for the most part, and stopped being, I don't know, like I said, I kind of felt less sci-fi, more fantasy, and I wasn't really into it. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I've missed through the years. I think for me, Eureka was probably my last bit of sci-fi nerdgasm watching, and when it pretty much turned and sci-fi kind of became, I don't know what it's become now. I mean, they put wrestling on there, which is fine, but yeah, that to me is what makes great sci-fi, is story. And I think it can be probably said that, despite criticisms, despite critiques, that when it really comes to what people will watch and what people like, I think that's the thing that you got to nail, is you have to have an interesting characters that people care about, situations and circumstances people care about, and then you have to tell that story in a way that's compelling. I think without cheating, without taking shortcuts, and without, lying to your audience with things that have nothing to do with it, like special effects, that gets them in the seats, but leaves them pretty empty and regretful, when they're walking out of the theater. So that's kind of how I view it. And I guess I still feel there's things for me to explore, and I think the fact that I do look at shows that I had missed or I didn't give as much of a chance, and I go, would have been a lot more fun if maybe I had given it, given a few more episodes to see if I was going to like it. So, and there's a lot of stuff that I haven't seen either. I mean, Star Trek Discovery. I love Star Trek Strange New Worlds. I've seen every one of those, and I love it. I've still not seen Star Trek Discovery, which I plan on actually watching. It's ended now, but it seemed like it started off a little bit rocky. I'm not sure. I mean, sure what was with the dark black not Vulcans, but Klingons, and then there was like a sex scene and some stuff that I seen, which was really far away from anything I'd seen before. But yeah, there's still some stuff out there I'd like to see. But hopefully, if you're listening to this and you're enjoying it, maybe you can tell me some ideas about what it is you think or how you feel is what makes great sci-fi and what makes a good sci-fi series, and maybe what some of your favorites are. This is going to do it for my 29th vlog. This is going to be a Friday vlog, so this is a little bit longer. And until my next vlog, I'll talk to you later.